The shouting stops and the iron stays. Dust hangs where a city used to breathe. You stand in the square of Mantinea with ash on your lips, a linen veil sticky with sweat, and a Spartan officer turning a wax-red tablet toward you like a verdict. No sermon, no roar of victory, only counting. Men to chains, elders to silence, and you, wives, to the middle line where a stylus bites through your old name. The seal hisses when it meets hot wax, and for a moment you hear it louder than the screams, a soft killer's sound like incense dying on a coal. Assigned, the clerk murmurs, as if assigning a jar or a mule. The iron keys at his belt tap, 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 a metronome for the end of your life. They call it order. They call it mercy, a roof, a ration, a placement. But everyone in the square knows the other word whispered under cloaks: wedding. 2 doors, no witnesses, a ledger instead of a priest. You will walk through one of them by lamplight, and when it closes, the world will insist you are someone else. You try to remember your husband's laugh, the color of his cloak, the taste of honeyed bread, anything that proves you were not born for ink and seal. But the officer has already moved to the next widow, and the tablet has already cooled. Some say the ugliest parts are rumors spun to ruin a reputation, little horrors stitched into memory by enemies. Yet in letters smuggled out that winter, a different story burns through the folds. The night Sparta assigned the widows did not end with victory. It began there. Tonight, you will know why. You live under a throne that never sleeps. Sparta is not marble speeches or theatre masks. It is iron shaped into buoys and bent into laws. Since the kings of the Agiad and Eurypontid lines share power like 2 hands on one sword, no single voice can be blamed, and that is its genius. This is the Peloponnesian War, and after 418 BCE, when Mantinea's gamble failed, the city's fear became your heir. That is the official line. Mantinea defeated, allies punished, order restored. You taste the dust of that line every time the wind moves. Sparta calls itself a camp, disguised as a city. Every stone knows the rhythm of the agoge, the taking of boys at 7, the shaving of softness, the marriage to discipline. You have watched those boys march through markets like a moving wall. You have watched mothers keep their tears behind their teeth because tears are not policy. The old men say this is why Sparta endures, because it teaches everyone how to vanish into the whole. You wonder how long a person can vanish before the gods forget their name. In the square after Mantinea, the victory does not look like banners. It looks like ledgers. It sounds like a stylus scratching wax. The officer beside you wears a crimson cloak cut narrow like a blade. When he turns, the fabric whispers like silk, though you know it is wool. At his belt, a ring of iron keys clicks faintly, an altar bell for a private rite. Fact: Spartan law prizes oikoi, households, above individual desire. Peace is counted in sons. Fact: the dead do not make sons, so the living must be moved like water into channels. The rumor rides the market air like incense you cannot see. It says there is a house with 2 doors and a quiet room where a woman receives a new name before dawn. Not a temple, not a court, just a room with a table and a witness who writes slowly, as if every letter must be tamed. The rumor says the seal is pressed while the lamp is still warm, and once the wax hardens, the past cannot follow you inside. The rumor never mentions singing. The rumor never mentions the way a heart learns to step without sound. Some historians insist this part was exaggerated to ruin a reputation, but the private letters from that winter suggest something else. The line lives in your ear like a splinter. You do not know these historians. You know only the weight of a hand on your shoulder and the way the crowd parts for officers, the way the sea parts for rock. In public, the clerk is gentle. Placement, he says, as if your life were a jar in storage. In private, women share smaller words: taken, assigned, kept. An old widow you once helped at the well squeezes your fingers until your bones click. Breathe through the seal, she whispers. Breathe until it cools. You think of your husband's shield. Now a circle of silence. Your loss is recent. 3 days of smoke. A name cooled in wax. Sparta's loss is older. It beats beneath every decree like a second heart. 464 BCE. The earth tore open Laconia, walls fell, helots rose. The city learned that danger is not only a spear from abroad, but a whisper inside the fields. Since then, fear wears a uniform. Boys seized at 7 into the agoge, speech trimmed, softness shaved, loyalty braided to barracks, not to beds. They call it virtue. You hear it as a scar reciting itself. In this design, love is permitted only if it never outweighs iron. A husband may speak tenderly at dusk, then return to the mess as the bell calls. A wife may manage lands like a steward of the state. The household is a tool. The cradle is a fortress. The law is the hand that keeps them pointed in the same direction. They say Lycurgus set the table long ago. No walls, no gold, no risk of softness. Let the men be the walls. Let habit be the lock. The city made itself narrow so it could not split. You feel the narrowness now. It lives in corridors, in ledgers, in the way an officer looks through you when there is a number to write. After Mantinea, 418 BCE, the narrowing tightened. Allies folded or bent. The ephors counted outcomes like grain. Sparta's math was clean. Cut enemy names from the next generation. End revolt before it grows teeth. How? Move the living into new houses. Move memory into ink. Move daughters into the future the city wants. Rumor carries the details the law will not say aloud. It says a widow is taken at evening to a plain room already warm from a lamp. It says her hair is bound back like a worker's, not a bride's. It says a white strip of wool hangs by the door to soften the closing, because even doors must not draw attention when policy moves. It says a man arrives who belongs to the barracks more than to any bed. He speaks little. He leaves before dawn. A clerk's hand makes a note. The note matters more than the night. Some historians insist this part was exaggerated to ruin a reputation, but the private letters from that winter suggest something else. You do not have the letters. You have the air, which smells of olive smoke and faint incense from a shrine that still pretends the world is kind. You have the silk thread you keep in your palm because it is soft, and the city is not. You have the ring of keys on the table, teeth touching, counting without mercy. Fact is a blade that shines whether you like it or not. Fact, Spartan men ate in common messes and slept away from wives, often until 30. Fact, fertility touched public policy. If a man failed to produce heirs, the city noticed. If a widow had proven her body could endure, the city noticed more. You feel yourself becoming a noticed thing. An older woman from the lane gives you what comfort the law forgot to invent. She brings oil and barley as if they could weigh as much as a prayer. Keep the cup upright, she tells you. It will make you feel steadier. You set the bronze cup on the table and watch the lamplight curl in its lip like a small golden sea. For a moment, steadiness pretends to be yours. Outside, boys run drills barefoot. The rhythm is all heel and breath and stone. Inside, your breath finds a pace that fits the room. The city has taught you its meter. Short steps, short sentences, short mercy. You rehearse your new name under your tongue and hate how quickly it begins to sit, and yet something in you refuses to cool. It is the ember the letters would recognize if they were placed in your hand. It is not. They say you have been placed, as if a pot on a shelf. The house that receives you sits where olives comb the wind and the lane ends in dust. The man is older, jaw nicked by an old spear glance, cloak cut plain, hands the color of the grove. He nods the way men nod at weather. Acceptance without affection. On the table, a ledger, a bronze cup, a ring of iron keys stacked from largest to smallest, like a small, obedient army. Fact, in Sparta, even after marriage, many men ate at the mess and slept in barracks. Private homes were second to public duty, and children were the city's proof that order was working. Fact feels like stone. You place your palm on it to keep from shaking. He shows you the room you will manage, the loom with its warp waiting, the jar of oil sealed in red wax, the shelf of cups that must face the same way. He speaks mostly in numbers, measures of grain, dates for pruning, the count of amphorae delivered last season. You answer in numbers because numbers are safe. They do not ask how many nights you stayed awake naming a fever out of a childish brow. Rumor is the language of women who have learned to survive without witnesses. Rumor says brides here are sometimes dressed not in finery, but in plain wool, hair bound short, set in a dim room so the body feels like a task, not a stage. Rumor says a man may enter on the city's clock, not his own. Rumor says if he cannot, another may, because the law prefers results to faces. Rumor says the door closes softly so that policy can pretend to be mercy. Some historians insist this part was exaggerated to ruin a reputation, but the private letters from that winter suggest something else. You hear those letters every time the keys settle and the teeth kiss. In their ghost sentences, you find instructions no law will write. Keep the lamp low, keep the cup upright. Breathe when the seal hisses, breathe again when it cools. Your host, husband by decree, does not threaten, he does not need to. The script threatens for him. If the house performs its role, the city smiles. If it stumbles, the city notices. Notice is the nearest thing to punishment in a place that prefers to call itself orderly. He asks your age. He asks how many births. He does not ask what your mother called you when you were small. You tell him a number and watch it knock the air from the room. Outside, a boy runs past with a spear he can barely lift. The shout of the agog rises like heat and falls like a gate. Fact: Spartan law allowed odd arrangements if it favored strong heirs, a husband lending a wife for offspring, adoptions made to glue bloodlines where the city wished. Ledger and cradle spoke the same grammar. You are learning its tenses with your body. At dusk he lays the keys down the way he laid them last night, the way he will tomorrow. The largest tooth catches the lamplight, the smallest hides in its shadow. You fold the silk thread you keep in your palm, contraband softness, and tuck it in your sleeve. The house smells of olive smoke and faint incense from a shrine someone tended before you. You whisper a name no longer yours and feel it linger like breath on cold metal. Forbidden bond, they call it, not between you and him, but between you and the state. A tie knotted with ink and tightened by habit until the knot remembers only itself. Somewhere a scribe marks a margin with satisfaction. Somewhere an officer taps a tablet like a judge touching a bench. The door moves a finger's width in the breeze. The wool strip brushes wood. You do not step back, you do not step forward. You stand in the hinge of a life that has been measured and poured. The city waits for the lock to turn. You listen to the teeth and decide tonight to keep counting your own. Control arrives folded, not shouted. 2 plain chitons, a wool mantle, a narrow belt, garments issued like lines in a script. The cloth is not silk, but it behaves like a rule. You smooth each fold as if smoothing will let you breathe inside it. The house smells of olive smoke and faint incense from a shelf shrine. On the table, the iron keys rest in their order, largest to smallest, like a lesson you are expected to recite without moving your lips. Fact: Spartan austerity was law as much as legend. No towering walls, common messes, Syssitia, weddings without feasting, citizens discouraged from luxury. The city prized obedience over display, order over ornament. The ephors inspected lives the way stewards inspected stores, quickly, efficiently, with notes. To misperform was not a scandal. It was a subtraction, of rations, of standing, of breath. A neighbor woman appears at your threshold with barley and oil and a gaze that never quite meets yours. She speaks in stitches, which hinge sighs, which jar leaks in rain, which steward hears through stone. She does not touch your hand. Touch is a rumor that notice can smell. Keep the cup upright, she says, glancing at the bronze lip-catching lamplight. It steadies more than water will. The man, your household by decree, keeps cadence. Dawn at the mess, midday in the grove, dusk, keys on the table. It is not threat, it is pattern. Patterns have edges sharper than knives because they never look like weapons. He shows you the ledger. Trees numbered, yields crossed, debts erased with a single red stroke that looks too much like the line you saw beside your name. Ink does not raise its voice. It does not need to. Rumor threads what law leaves blank. It says, a bride here is sometimes cut from the world for a night, hair-bound, mantle coarse, a room dark enough to turn the body into a task. It says a cup of watered wine waits within reach, not to celebrate but to keep hands busy. It says the door closes softly because loudness would admit what policy refuses to say aloud. It says a clerk sits in the courtyard with a lamp and a tablet until the right hour, because witnesses must exist somewhere, even if they are not invited inside. Some historians insist this part was exaggerated to ruin a reputation, but the private letters from that winter suggest something else. You hear those letters in the tiny click the keys make when the breeze moves. The sound is small as a moth, but it teaches your bones the grammar of this place. You fold the mantle twice, then again, until it weighs like a decision. You learn which floorboard tattles, which latch smiles, which window swallows breath without echo. A quiet house is not peace, it is choreography. Fact: in Sparta, married men often slipped to wives by stealth and left before dawn. Loyalty braided back to barracks by breakfast. The law preferred fathers who belonged to the mess, not to lullabies. If a cradle arrives, the city smiles. If months pass empty, the city counts. Counting is the nearest word here for care. You place the cup upright. You place your hands flat beside it to stop their tremble. The lamp lowers. The room becomes a bowl that holds its own darkness. Outside, boys run without speaking. Inside, the ledger breathes like a sleeping animal. You adjust the mantle on the peg by the door and feel the wool brush your knuckles. The night arrives the Spartan way, on schedule. The mess bell fades. Dogs do not bark. The iron keys lie on the table, largest to smallest, like a short prayer you do not believe in. The lamp smokes a thin thread of incense where the wick met resin. You straighten the woven mat that didn't need straightening, then the bronze cup you already set upright. Order keeps your hands busy, while your mind stands at the door. Fact: after 418 BCE and the defeat at Mantinea, Sparta tightened what it called order of households. Married men returned to barracks at night. Visits to wives were brief and often secret, and the city prized heirs as proofs of peace. That is the surface. Under it, rumor waits like a second lock. Rumor: brides assigned by the list are prepared without witnesses. Hair-bound plain, mantle coarse, a dim room with 2 doors. One for the entry, one for the clerk who writes the hour. Rumor: if a husband is old or away, another body may stand in for him, because the city prefers results to names. Rumor: the door is turned from the outside so no one can claim choice. Rumor always keeps a key it won't show. Footsteps test the threshold. Not loud, measured. A tooth of metal samples the latch, then finds its brother. The door opens the width of a breath. He stands there with the plain mantle, the face the law calls respectable, and the weariness of a man who carries policy like a pack. He says your new name. He does not say the old. He does not ask permission. Etiquette here performs the feeling that permission would have had. You notice what you are not supposed to. The page mark on his thumb, the way his eyes flick once toward the ledger on the shelf, as if blessings can be copied after they recommitted, the way he sets his sandals so they won at a ring on stone. Sparta hates echoes unless they come from shields. Some historians insist this part was exaggerated to ruin a reputation, but the private letters from that winter suggest something else. You hear those letters in the pauses he chooses, careful places where a softer city would put words. You hear them in the way the night holds its breath, in how the strip of wool at the door kisses wood so the hinge will not tell stories. You hear them in your own ribs when you try to name what is happening, and the grammar refuses you. He drinks a mouth of water like a soldier taking orders in. He sets the cup down in the circle of lamp glow. You can see your face in the curve for a moment, thin, determined, terribly alive. He reaches for the keys out of habit, then stops. There is no bolt needed. The quiet has already done the work of a lock. Fact: policy outlives pity. It eats pity and calls it clarity. Tonight is a point written long before it arrives. In the Peloponnesian War, men argue over who holds ground. In houses like this, the city argues over who holds futures. The argument is settled in ink. You think wildly of taking the keys and running. To where? Sparta has no walls because it turned the countryside into a room. Every road here leads back to the list. My ending was already signed. The lamp steadies. The night, obedient, closes its hand. Somewhere beyond the grove, boys run until breath becomes law. Inside, the door learns its soft lesson and forgets how to be loud. Morning is tidy. It irons last night flat. You sweep the threshold, feed the brazier, set the bronze cup where light can live a little while. The iron keys rest in their order, largest to smallest, like a psalm the city hums under its breath. A sparrow writes its own name in dust with its feet and takes off before anyone can list it. You envy a bird that leaves no ledger. Fact: after Mantinea, 418 BCE, Sparta's allies shifted, oaths were recited again with smaller voices, and households like this one absorbed the quiet mathematics of victory. There is no public decree with your name. There is only a steward who brings oil and hints, a neighbor who learns your new name quickly, a market woman who wraps figs and calls you mistress while measuring obedience with her eyes. In a city that pretends to hate ornament, notice is the finest jewelry, worn by those who matter, tightened on those who must. The erasure works like incense. You don't see it at first, only the way the air changes. A strip of wool softens the door's bite. Your tongue softens old syllables until they stop asking to be said. The man, your household by decree, speaks of olives and frost. You reply in numbers and weather until the hours fit the ledger. Sometimes the gentleness between you is real and small, like a secret seed saved in a fold of cloth. Sometimes it is only policy wearing a human face. Rumor doesn't vanish, it wears quieter shoes. It says births arrive faster in houses where lamps burn low and keys never ring. It says empty months make doors close a shade harder. It says a scribe in town keeps a private list in red wax, and that when a widow disappears from the market, her line becomes a stroke that does not stop where the page ends. Rumor is cruel because it refuses to give you a witness you can touch. Some historians insist this part was exaggerated to ruin a reputation, but the private letters from that winter suggest something else. You hear those letters every time the mantle brushes wood at dusk, every time a messenger passes the gate without looking in, every time your hand pauses over a name you no longer write. Fact: Spartan men often returned to barracks before dawn. Sons were the city's insurance. Daughters learned the ledger's weather. What the poets sing, shields, phalanx, bronze, was only half the machine. The other half was here. Rooms that learned to keep quiet. Lives pressed into columns, futures carried like amphorae from house to house. You walk the grove at noon and count trees with the older man. The olives keep their own time, indifferent. A breeze lifts the linen at your wrist like a small flag of a country that will never be drawn. In the afternoon, you mend the strip of wool that pads the door and think how mercy in this place is measured in threads, not proclamations. The day lays itself down, fold by fold, the way a scribe lays down lines until a page looks finished. At night you hold the keyring and feel the cold travel boneward. You are not erased, you are filed. There is a difference, and it is the size of a breath. You keep that breath. You keep the memory of a chipped bowl, a laugh at harvest, a ribbon you never went back to fetch. You keep the cadence of your first name inside your teeth where lists cannot pry. Morning will iron the hours again. You will straighten the cup again. The city will count again. Somewhere an officer touches a tablet as if blessing it. Somewhere a clerk warms a seal above a lamp and calls it peace. Even now there is a sealed letter they refuse to release. Breathe in, slow, to the count of 3. 1 key, 2, 3. Breathe out, let the wax cool. The square is empty now, only dust and the hush of early lamps. On the table, the bronze cup holds a thumbprint of light. Beside it, the ring of iron waits without hurry. You fold the mantle once, twice, until it becomes smaller than the fear it carried. Outside, Olives comb the night. Inside, your heart remembers its quiet work. History writes in ledgers because ledgers don't tremble. But you are allowed to. You're allowed to sit with what the city calls order and name it what it felt like. A room, 2 doors, a breath you kept for yourself. Not broken, filed, not erased, endured. In-breath. Hold. Out-breath. Picture a thin ribbon of incense, the kind that rises, bends, and disappears without ever admitting it was smoke. Picture silk at your wrist, soft as a promise you can keep. That tomorrow you will set the cup upright again, hang the keys where you can find them, and keep one small thing that belongs to no list, your pace. If a name must be written, let it be written by you within you, where the red stroke cannot reach. If a seal must fall, let it fall on yesterday. Listen. Far away, iron speaks to iron and fades. Closer, a sparrow's feet write nothing in the dust and fly. You are here, breathing. One more breath, in and out. The lamp leans towards sleep. Gold dims to ember, ember to shadow. Silk settles, iron cools. The last candle lowers its head and goes out.